Modern Data Analytics in Excel. This is one of a number of free webinars I've done based on my book. The idea is that you don't need to have read the book, but if you want to look at it later, this would be a good primer for you. I'm hoping to get through all the chapters at some point. Don't have an exact schedule for that, but we'll talk more about timelines later. I'm going to share the link to follow along. We are recording today. I think those are all the like housekeeping kind of stuff I have. And again, if you've not worked with me before, my name is George Mellon. I'm a Microsoft Excel MVP, founder of Stringfest Analytics, author of Modern Data Analytics in Excel, and LinkedIn Learning instructor. I'm sure there are other things that you could find out about me. Probably the best way is just to look online and find out. Connect with me on LinkedIn if you have not. All right. So with that all being said, let me, as usual, we're going to share the download files in the chat here. Okay, we don't have a big group right now tuned in, but it's always possible that more people will tune in. So if that's the case, you know what to do. If you've been here before, you are welcome to reshare that link, recopy and paste it. Okay. It actually looks like somebody just came in as I was saying that. So downloads are in the chat. We are recording. Let's get this fired up. So I'm going to download those files. Okay. These are all the files from the book. So you will be working with these downloads. If you want to get a sense of what this book would do for you, what the topics are, what the data is, it's all available in this folder here. So go ahead and give that a download, and then just go ahead and give it an extract. Okay. And then we will get started shortly. So I'm going to go ahead and I have downloaded files. All right. If you could let me know, just leave a little thumbs up underneath that message so I know that you have it. I'm going to put the link in there one more time, and then we'll get started real shortly here. We're going to be on, I believe it's chapter 10. Yeah, so, okay. Chapter 10. All right. So go ahead and download that. Just give me a thumbs up when you're ready, and we will continue on here. So we're going to be talking about dynamic arrays today and dynamic array functions. Just to refresh your memory, this is from the Eventbrite page, but what we're going to do today is talk about what is the difference between traditional static arrays. So if something's a dynamic array, then that probably means there's a static array. So we're going to talk about what that is. Then we're going to talk about dynamic array functions and how they are similar but different to traditional functions in Excel. We're going to look at a few implementations of dynamic array functions. Going to let you do things like filter your data, sort your data, look up your data. You'll see some of these things were easily done enough in traditional Excel formulas. Some of them were not so easy to do. And I think you'll see a lot of opportunities open up for you as you get started with dynamic array functions. So that's our goal for today. I am planning to go for an hour. We'll see if there's extra time. I can always have you do some exercises based on the back of the book and chapter. All right, I still don't see any thumbs up. Anybody out there? Hello? Just leave me a thumbs up or let me know some sign of life that you've got this downloaded. So I can, okay, I saw one. All right, good. Okay, thank you, Steven. Okay, cool. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and fire up chapter 10. Again, for those of you just joining us, this is being recorded. It will get emailed to you. Okay, please check your email. I've been getting people like messaging me asking for the link. Like, please, these are free sessions. So if you could just take a little bit of initiative and try to find it, I'm not hard to find online. So please do that before you ask me, because I email it, like I will email it. Okay, enough with the public service announcement. Let's go ahead and get started. So what are we talking about in array here? What are array functions? What are dynamic array functions? What are dynamic arrays in Excel? All an array is in Excel is a collection of values. So this is an array. It's just we have a series of cells right here. Okay. So in traditional Excel, now you may have remembered this before, but let's say you wanted to refer to this array somewhere else in the workbook. Okay, now you might think, okay, well, let's just do this, and we're going to drag my formula across, okay, and we're referring to these cells. But each one of these formulas is returning one and only one value, right? We're not really referring to the entire array. We're really just referring to the individual cells in each formula. So how can we actually refer to multiple cells in one formula? So that's really the name of the game here, right? We want to refer to multiple cells, multiple values in one reference or in one formula. Okay, so that is really what we're trying to do here. Now, traditionally in Excel, the way we would need to do this, and some of you might remember this, is we would do, let's refer to this entire range here, okay, and then we would do a Control Shift and Enter. Okay, now what that would do is return these curly Q braces. So again, you'll even notice that we're only seeing the 3 right here. So this reference is not very intelligent. All of our values are in this cell. They're stored here. We're not seeing all of them right now. So this is what would be considered like a static array reference. Okay, so what we would need to do, let's say we actually wanted to show all of these multiple values, is let's do equals. Let's select the range here. Let's do a Control Shift and Enter. And you'll see that all of them are being referred to, okay? But this is not a super smart reference. This is not going to automatically resize. Like if I added a value here, it's not smart enough to pick up. I might be able to insert a value here, but no, see, you'll see that the 7 isn't here anymore. So this is a rather unintuitive, static, naive, clunky way to refer, again, to multiple values or multiple cells in one reference or in one formula. So that's really what a static array is. Okay, so again, that's Control Shift and Enter, and you might see that in some like older versions of Excel or older Excel tutorials. Fortunately, with newer versions of Excel, we don't really have to worry about that anymore. So all we need to do now, and see, you'll even notice that like if I'm trying to delete this, it says I can't change part of an array. I actually have to manually select all the values in that array and delete it manually. So it's just not a very intuitive process. All right, so let's take these numbers 3, 4, and 7 again. All we have to do now in Excel to refer again to multiple cells, multiple values, we'll just refer to those values. So I don't need that Control Shift Enter anymore. I can just go ahead and hit Enter, and that's going to solve it for us. So don't worry about like doing anything fancy anymore. You'll notice that this is much more intuitive. So if I insert a value here, you'll see that that gets added, right? I could even, pretty easily, if I inserted another value, right, I would need to re-refer to this range. We're going to actually look at a way that we can make this even more intuitive than it is right now, but you'll notice that everything we do here is dynamically updating. And again, this is one formula, right? We're not doing A2, B2, C2, right? This is all being updated in one formula. So it might not seem like a lot right now. However, there is a lot that we can do with this when it comes to writing formulas. Right now, this is just a dynamic array reference versus a static array reference. But now what we're going to do is move into actually building formulas to refer to these ranges of data. So again, the idea is that we're going to be able to return multiple pieces of output, multiple cells, multiple data sources in one formula. That's going to let us do everything from sort our data to filter it to return unique values, all sorts of stuff with dynamic arrays. Any questions so far about what we're talking about here? Logistic questions, anything on your mind before we move on to actually looking at some dynamic array functions? Cool. All right. So now let's go ahead and move on to this array functions formula. Or I'm sorry, this worksheet right here. So we have a pretty typical data set. Now we are going to be working with a table. So I have done sessions on tables before. You'll notice, obviously, the first main sign is that it looks nice. If I click in and out of this range here, you'll see the table design tab comes on and off. So we are going to be working with tables. The notation is going to be a little bit different, but let's try to analyze this data set. Now we're going to start with what would be called a static array formula versus a dynamic array formula or function. So let's say we want to find the unique product names. Okay, now I'll put this in the chat. I wouldn't worry too much about memorizing this function because you're going to see it is very, very clunky here. Okay, but what I'm going to do here is let's do equals. Okay, so I'm going to do a control shift and enter. Okay, and you'll see, let me make this a little bigger. This is a dynamic array function. Now, again, if we only select the first cell, we're only going to see the first value return in that cell. Now, I can manually drag this down, okay, and you'll see that that gets repeated. Let's go ahead and actually select a few cells here and do another control shift and enter. Okay, and that's still not even working. And again, we can't change part of an array. Okay, let's delete this entire thing. Now, I think what I can do is let's select this. Let's do equals. Let's paste it. And I'll put this formula in the chat. But you're seeing it's very clunky. Even I'm struggling with it. And all we're trying to do here, let me actually show the solution file over here. So this is the solution file in the workbook, chapter 10 solutions in your file. But basically what we're doing here is using the static array functions. And this is not a terribly intuitive way to do it. This is not going to know, if I change this new, you'll see here that rubber bands is gone now. This isn't resizing. So again, the issue is that this is pretty static. This is just based on however many rows we arbitrarily decide to add into this array range here. So it's not a great solution. Okay. So let's take a look at actually how can we use dynamic array functions to make this, again, much more dynamic. Now, these functions tend to work much more easily. These are still functions. So we used functions many, many times before. So don't necessarily freak out that you're doing something entirely different in Excel. Yes, the inputs and the outputs work a little bit differently because now we are referring to and returning, multiple cells, multiple values at the same time. But, you've used VLOOKUP before, right? You've used SUMIF before. You've used COUNT-A before. These are all functions, right? And all these functions, right, you provide inputs, they return outputs, okay? Just this time, your outputs will have multiple, right, values, or your outputs are dynamic arrays, basically. So we're going to be returning dynamic arrays as our outputs instead of just individual cells. So let's go ahead and do that, okay? And again, remember, with functions, sometimes your arguments or parameters are optional. Sometimes they're required. Sometimes there's a default. If we think about it, even if I did like equals VLOOKUP, you'll notice some of these values are in the square brackets. That means that those are optional, right? There's a default setting in this case, so the range lookup by default, it is an approximate match, okay? If we wanted to change it to a exact match, we would just go ahead, come to that argument, and set what we wanted, in that case, a false or a 0. Okay, so that's all a function is, right? It's like a recipe. We're giving it inputs. It's going to give us outputs. In this case, the output is a dynamic array. All right, so let's try that out. So the first one we're going to do is the unique function. As you were seeing, I was kind of struggling with the traditional way of doing it. We had to use index and match. We had to use the curly cues. It wasn't terribly smart, right? If we changed any of these values, you'll see that even this one, for whatever reason, isn't even showing up in this range. So let's see how we can make this a little bit more intuitive. We're going to use the unique function to do that. So let's say unique product names, okay? And let's do unique. Okay, so again, this is just a function, all right? We've done functions before. We're going to say, what array do we want? Now, array, again, an array is a range of values. We talked about that earlier. So this is our range of values. I'm using table notation. Again, I would encourage you to use tables. Tables tend to work really, really well with dynamic arrays and dynamic array functions. So let's go ahead and Continue on here. Now, the next one, this is something that you might not be used to with Excel formulas and functions, but this one's going to ask us by row or by column, okay? So by default, this is going to return unique rows. I'm sorry, by default, this is going to return unique columns, so it's going to assume that you want to find unique values based on the column. If you wanted to do it based on the row, you could do that. You would just set, instead of this being a true, you would set it to false. Now I'm good with the default setting of true. So all I'm going to do in here, and you'll see this a lot with dynamic array functions, is we'll just leave that argument blank. I'll just put a space in there. So we're just going to use the default setting. You'll see that a lot because you're going to notice that these dynamic array functions tend to have a lot more arguments, a lot more parameters than what you might be used to in traditional Excel formulas. Last but not least, it says return items that appear once and only once. So that would be more of a true unique statement. If you looked at like SQL databases, something unique means that it's in here once and only once. Okay, that's not quite what we want. We want something more like return the, like drop the duplicates basically. So let's put this as true. Okay. Okay. If we set this to false, let's see what we get. Right. So you notice that the true is really more of a truly unique value, whereas the false is more like what we would get if we were to drop duplicates from this. There is a drop duplicate feature, right, in Excel. You've used it before, and it works, but it's static. So you do it once, there's really no way to audit it. If you need to do it again, you need to manually run it again. This is really nice. It just automatically updates. There is a way to do this in, again, Power Query is another way to remove duplicates. That's a repeatable way as well. However, you do need to automatically, you would need to refresh that query somehow. Okay, so this is really, I think, sticking to kind of Excel's roots in terms of, hey, we're writing a formula, it's giving us the results, and we can easily tactile, this gets added, this gets added again. So this is a very nice, like physically intuitive way of working with our data. Really good if we're trying to build any kind of financial model or business model or any kind of, analysis or simulation or whatever you need to do where you want your user to be able to add inputs into this workbook and automatically see how that's going to impact the results. Dynamic arrays work really, really well for that. Any questions so far with anything that we've been doing? And again, all these functions and solutions or stuff like that are in chapter 10 solutions. I'll try to put these in the chat as well as we go through. Everybody good so far? Okay, I see one thumbs up. Thank you. There's a little sign of life up there. Thank you, Jorge. Okay. All right, so now that we've done one dynamic array function, how can we build on these? So typically what we want to do is, and you're probably used to this in Excel, right? You have one thing, maybe we want to come up with a sum of sales amount, and then, maybe you need to take like, 5% of that because it's like a tax or something. So often what we're doing in Excel is we're, building, we have a lot of steps, right? We want to take one range, we want to analyze that, we want to analyze the result of that, right? So there are a lot of, steps that build on top of each other. So how would this work if our input is a dynamic array? Because again, this is a dynamic array. You're going to see that as I click in and out of this, it almost kind of like pops up off the worksheet. Okay, so this is indicating to us that this is kind of like one cell that works together, one set of values, one array that works together. You'll even notice that if I click on the first cell, the formula looks like a regular formula in Excel. But as I scroll down here, it gets kind of grayed out. So again, this formula is driving this cell, but it's not really stored in that formula, right? It's not really stored in that cell. So a little bit different than what we're used to working with in Excel. So a few things to be aware of as you're working with dynamic arrays. One of the things you're going to see often is because these are dynamic arrays and you don't know exactly how many values you're going to have as the result, you might get what's called this spill operator. So let's say, I'm just going to put a block right here. And if I tried to add a new product down here, so what we would expect to happen, right, is new product would file in to this value underneath file folders. Let's go ahead and hit enter, and you'll see we actually get an error. So this is called the spill error. Basically what's happening, and if we hit this error sign, it's going to say a cell we need to spill data to isn't blank. So again, you want to think about this dynamic array. Everything works as a complete whole, and if you can't show one of the values, then none of them are going to, it's complete solidarity. None of them are going to show up. So you'll even notice they're like little, like the line isn't straight anymore. It's like a dotted line across the dynamic array cells here. So that just means you need to get rid of that. So that's what that spill error means here. Because again, if you're thinking about it, we're spilling values, right? In this case, it's down, right? We could spill values, there's like a sequence function, for example, and I'll go ahead and even, put like a block here. So let's do sequence. Now, again, what sequence does is return a value of numbers, or a sequence of numbers, I should say. So let's say we want, 10 rows by 10 columns. So now we're going to have a dynamic array with rows and columns. It's not just one column, it's multiple rows, it's multiple columns. Let's go ahead and close that. Again, we're seeing that spill error again happen because we have one. Just one cell is enough to block it. Okay. So that is what that spill error means. Just be aware of that. So I guess the moral of the story here is if you're going to use dynamic array functions, try to give yourself a wide berth, right, in case this might update and expand for any reason. All right, another thing to know with this, and this is where things get really interesting, is that, again, we can refer to this dynamic array dynamically. So what I mean by that is, let's say we wanted to count unique product names, kind of a natural next step here, right? So we have the list of unique product names, but now we want to count them. Okay, so what I'm going to do is count A. All right, again, count A will count text values, whereas if we were to just use count, this is actually going to give us a 0. Okay, so a couple interesting things going on right here. First of all, we're seeing it at 0. That's not what we want. That's easily enough addressed by just turning it into a count A. Okay, but and the other interesting thing here is this hash sign. Now, this might not be something that you're used to before. So if we did like I2 through I8, right? Okay, that gives us the answer 7. But again, you'll see here, new product 2, this isn't going to update anymore. So this isn't dynamically linked to our dynamic array. So we want a dynamic reference to the dynamic array. Rather than referring to this static set of cells, we want to refer to the dynamic array here, and that's going to be done with that hash sign. So we're going to do I2, we're going to do hash, okay? Oops, not the plus sign. Let's go ahead and clear that out. And now you'll see everything here updates. So we are able to build, right, formulas and references on top of our dynamic array, on top of our data source. So everything's fully dynamic now. Again, really, really useful as we try to build dynamic models, simulations, reports, things like that, where our data might change. We want our user to be able to see those outputs change in real time. Any questions so far about how dynamic array functions work, how the spill operator works, anything like that? Anybody? Any signs of life there? Okay, I see one thumbs up. Thank you. I thought I saw a hand raised. Yeah, if anybody, if you do have a question, you're welcome to put it in the chat and I will take a look. Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna keep going, and if you do have one, just let me know via the chat, please. All right. So we looked at the unique function. There are a whole bevy of dynamic array functions in Excel. They let you do lots of different things. So we're going to look at some typical use cases here. Okay. And where things get really exciting is when you start mixing and matching them, but I don't think we're going to actually do that today. I'm going to clear out of that. Let's take a look at the filter function. Okay. So what this is going to do is what it sounds like. We're going to filter data. And again, our result's going to be a dynamic array. So what's really nice here, I've had people in the past ask me, maybe you have each of these salespeople and you want to be able to put all of their sales, you want Halpert's sales in one worksheet and you want Vance's sales in another worksheet, and you don't necessarily want to, copy and paste manually, each of these sales. That would be super tedious. Maybe you have people, I don't know if you've worked with people that are trying to compete with how the data set should be filtered. There's some improvements in Excel to be able to do that, especially Excel Online. But one way that works really well with this, being able to keep your kind of like raw data set intact and have the data get filtered elsewhere in the workbook without, again, Power Query can do that too, but it would require refreshing the workbook. It's a little bit more, labor heavy. We can use the filter function to do that. Okay, so again, you'll see that we will have a few parameters here. Some of them we may or may not use, and no, we don't want that function. We don't filter. Okay, so again, the first one is going to be our array. We've talked about what an array is. It's just our set of values. I'm going to filter by the table. Okay, so again, I'm using tables throughout here. I'm going to refer to all the data in the tables here. I'm not going to include the headers because, again, I don't really want to filter the headers. Let's say I want, all the data where employee last is Halpert. Well, employee last, right, that's just a label. That doesn't equal Halpert, so that header row isn't going to get returned. So let's go ahead and filter. Let's say, for example, we'll use product again. DM sales product again. So the notation here, we have the name of the table. Inside the square brackets, we have the product. And let's set that to sticky notes. Okay. I'm going to call it sticky notes to make sure we're precise here. Okay. All right. So you'll see that we get that returned. Okay. There's one sticky notes value. Okay, let's try to find one where there's more than one. So let's say, for example, maybe if I change employee last to Halpert, because I know that there are multiple records there. Okay, you'll see that that gets returned. Okay, so one thing that you're going to notice that's a little bit annoying here is we don't have the headers. Okay, now my little hack for doing this is it is going to require a second formula, but what I'm going to do here is let's hit equals. We are going to just go ahead and just hit equals, click up here on the first header, and just move your mouse over until you see DM sales headers. This is another notation for tables. So what we're doing here is dynamically referring to all of the headers in this data set. So for example, if I were to insert a column, you'll see everything updates over here, right? If I were to delete a column, everything updates. So it does take a couple of separate formulas, but now what's really nice about this again is that I have the headers dynamically kind of like linked to the data. So that's the filter function. There's a lot of stuff you can do here. We can filter by multiple criteria. The way you're going to do this is let's go ahead and let's clear out of that. So what I'm going to do is let's filter. We're going to do our sales. We are going to, let's say, DM sales. So you'll see that you'll notice that I put this in parentheses. We'll talk about that in a second. Let me get this written out. Copy paper. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is the asterisk. So what the asterisk is going to do is do an and criteria for our filter. So let's do this DM sales. Let's say quantity. I'll put this in the chat shortly here. Greater than 5. Okay. So I did a few things here. I'm not doing Control-Shift-Enter. We talked about we don't have to do that anymore. So we have two criteria going on here. The asterisk is an and statement. Okay, I just remember that like A for asterisk is and. All right. The other thing I did here, and this is just a personal choice, is I use the Alt and Enter. So what that's going to do is add a key. Oh, looks like I didn't actually put that in the chat. Alt and Enter gives you a carriage return. So as we're writing slightly more complex formulas here, it's kind of nice to break each clause down, as it were. Maybe you might even want to put one right here too, right? Alt and enter. So you're seeing I'm putting each statement inside parentheses, okay? And then I'm going to break that up with that asterisk. Okay. So what that does, again, is allows us to filter with an and criteria. So that's pretty cool. If I wanted to make this an or, that's easily enough done. I'm just going to change that asterisk to a plus sign. And again, of course, with it being an or condition, we are going to get a lot more values returned. Okay. And we can mix and match, right? All of your grade school arithmetic comes into play here, greater than versus greater than or equal to, so on and so forth. So we can now filter by multiple and or criteria, which is pretty cool. I actually find this a little bit easier to do than use the wherever that home, yeah, the sort custom sort, right? This thing I find a little clunky, and trying to do an or statement, right, using the menu is not that easy either. So it's almost a little bit easier to write these with functions anyway. All right. Any questions so far about filter, dynamic arrays, or anything like that? Oh, okay, I put my keyboard into Greek somehow. All right, let me change back to English. All right. Sort by. Okay, so this is just a little bit of a tour of some of these different functions. So sort by sounds like what it does. Okay, so we're going to sort our data by something this time. Let's do sort by. Okay, so there is a sort function. Okay, there's also a sort by function. I find that sort by works a little bit easier. Okay, you can explore the mechanics between the two and how they're different if you want. But let's go ahead and use sort by. Okay, so as the name suggests, it's going to sort a range based on the values in a corresponding range. Okay, so what we could do here in this case, again, we're going to sort our table. There's DM sales. Okay, now this is going to work kind of like if you've ever used like sum ifs or count ifs before or average ifs. We're going to say what column do we want to use and then how do we want to use it. So all of these following arguments kind of come in like pairs. So if I wanted to do something like DM sales, okay, let's say DM sales amount, okay, and then we're going to do a -1 for descending. So a 1 would give you an ascending, -1 would give you descending, okay. So now you'll see that we have everything sorted in sales amount descendingly. Change that, that's going to be ascendingly. And now it's really, really easy. Let's say we also maybe want to sort this. Okay, so we sorted this by sales amount. Now let's go ahead and actually, I'm going to sort this by DM sales. Let's do employee last. Okay. And I'm going to make that one ascending. Okay. I'm going to use my alt and enter again. So again, just helps me kind of keep track of how these pairs work together. So I'm going to sort this table. I'm going to sort it by employee last ascendingly. And then I'm going to sort it by sales descendingly. Okay, and it looks like I missed something here. Didn't like something that I did. Let's see what I did wrong here. Okay, there's a problem. I don't see automatically what I did wrong here. So let's break this down one at a time here. Okay, so that looks good. And now let's go ahead, DM sales. Let's do our sales amount. And let's do a -1. Okay, so that seems to be working. Let's do another alt and enter. Okay, so that seems to have fixed it. So now you're seeing, right, we have it sorted by employee and then it's sorted. So we're able to sort by multiple levels now. Again, this is fully dynamic. So, maybe you've used the custom sort before. Okay, but this makes it a little bit easier to do that. Okay, filtering, I think I actually used custom sort. I meant to show you, you could use these filter buttons, right, to filter your data. Custom sort sorts the data, obviously. So my bad on that one, but they kind of work together, right? If you're sorting, you're often filtering and vice versa. So, right, you could use these to filter your data. I find sort and filter functions honestly a little bit easier to use once you get into the habit of it. So that is the sort by function. So we've looked at filter, we've looked at sort by, we've looked at unique. There are all sorts of dynamic array functions, all sorts of stuff that you can do with this. I'm going to show you one more. This is a big one, okay? And then we will see what we want to do after that. But any questions so far? Hopefully this is going well, and you're learning some new stuff here about dynamic arrays. Again, all this is in my book, Dynamic Array or Modern Data Analytics in Excel. So you can take a look at that. Uh, again, if Santa's listening, maybe he can get you a copy. Great holiday gifting choice, if I do say so myself. Okay, we're going to go to XLOOKUP. Any other questions before we look at XLOOKUP here? All right. So I think most of you have probably run a VLOOKUP before. If not, that's okay. You probably understand what a VLOOKUP wants us to do. Okay, so I'm on this XLOOKUP worksheet. This is a pretty typical thing, right? We have data. It's coming from multiple tables, okay? So we have branches over here. We have products over here, okay? And we probably want that context in this data set. So it just says product ID. I don't know all the product IDs by heart. So what I want to do is look up the product names and prices. Similar idea with the branch ID. I don't have those by heart. I want to actually add those into my report so people actually know what I'm talking about, so it's less jargony. How can I do that with formulas so I'm not doing this manually? Now, a couple ways to do this in the past with Excel were VLOOKUP and index match, okay? They still have their values. We're not going to talk about like performance and pros and cons. This is a very small data set, right? It's like 20 rows. I don't think that performance matters that much right now, okay? We just want something efficient that's going to take care of our use cases really, really well. And I think you'll find that dynamic arrays and particularly XLOOKUP works really well for this. So let's take a look at how XLOOKUP works. This is a dynamic array function. We're going to use it more of like a traditional function right now because what we're going to do is return, again, we want to find all of our branch IDs, we want to find our product names, we want to find our product prices. Now, you've probably had this issue in the past, for example, with, if we set branch name over here and I tried to look this up, I could look up my branch ID. I want to go over to this table. And if you've ever used VLOOKUP before, we're kind of at a dead end right now because VLOOKUP needs to look rightward, okay? Our lookup column is to the left over here. So we're kind of at an impasse right now. We can't do a -2 or anything like that. There are some like workarounds that you can do with this, but none of it's very elegant. So what we're going to do right now is use the XLOOKUP function to take care of this for us. So you'll see that this works kind of like VLOOKUP, also a little differently. There are a lot more options here. This is a very powerful function. There are a lot of ways we can specify. You'll notice that instantly, look how many like options we have here. A lot of these are optional. So the ones in the square brackets are optional. We won't necessarily set them ourselves, but we are going to set these first three for sure. First one is lookup value. That is what it sounds like. Okay, so we are going to look up our branch ID. Okay, next one is lookup array. So this is going to work a little bit differently than traditional lookup formulas, whereas before we would actually have to look up, the entire table and then use that index counter, and that always confused people. How many columns is it, like 1 versus 2? You have to do that math in your head. How many columns? So we're not doing that anymore. So all we're going to do here is look up the corresponding branch ID column. So we're only going to refer to that column, okay? We're not referring to the whole table, and we're not indexing. So we're going to say, so here's our value, here's our branch. You'll notice, again, I am using tables, so this notation is a little bit different. I would encourage you to get used to using tables, okay? So we do have the @ sign. That's just saying the branch ID in this row, okay? So that is our branch ID in that row. Okay, we're looking up the branch ID. Now what column do we want to look up? Okay, it would be that branch name. So this is a lot more modular in a lot of ways, right? We're not doing an index, lookup column, anything like that. I'm going to go ahead and just close the parentheses. We don't need to do anything else here, okay? One of the nice things with this too is the default is an exact match. So you've probably gotten really frustrated with VLOOKUP. You always had to specify an exact match. It was very rare you actually wanted an approximate match. XLOOKUP handles that for us. So the default is an exact match. No need to specify that we want the approximate match anymore. So you'll even notice here, if I go all the way to the bottom, to the end here, right? This next to last argument here says exact match. That is the default right now. If we actually wanted something else, if we wanted an approximate match, if we wanted to even use like regular expressions or wildcard matching, more advanced stuff, we could do that. But the exact match is the default. So we don't actually have to specify any of this stuff anymore. A lot of cool stuff we can do with this, but let's just stick to the basics right now. So you'll see we have that looked up. We actually only use 3 arguments versus 4 for VLOOKUP. So that's pretty cool. And it gets even better. For example, if we wanted to find product name, okay, let's go ahead and XLOOKUP that up. Okay, so we're going to look up the product ID. We are going to do the same thing here, okay, and we can look this up right there, okay. And you'll notice that we do have a couple of missing values. So you've probably seen this in your lookups before. Kind of throws a wrench into the works. So we don't actually need to do something. Maybe you've done this before with VLOOKUP where you had to, wrap it all inside of an if error and then maybe say like not found or something like that. Okay, no need to do stuff like that anymore. All we're going to say here, this is the 4th argument here. If not found, we'll just put not found. So this really handles a lot of those use cases in a much more intuitive way. I feel like XLOOKUP, Microsoft put a lot of time into researching how people actually look up their data, and it made XLOOKUP respond correspondingly, right? So a lot of nice benefits to it, okay? And, I know people have their opinions on like performance and this and that and edge cases and all that stuff. That's fine, whatever. Again, we're dealing with 20 rows. You're probably doing stuff like that often as well, where, the data you're working with is not huge. Using one function versus another isn't going to make a whole lot of performance issues. But, one of them might be a lot more intuitive than the other. So I would say go ahead and use the intuitive one. Okay, that's what we did right here. Again, we don't have to use a wrapper if error handling function anymore. That just handles it all for itself. So there's a lot of other stuff you can do with XLOOKUP, super cool function. And again, this really is powered by dynamic arrays. So you can do some more stuff with XLOOKUP. So many more functions you can do using dynamic arrays. There's, the sequence function. So that'll give you a sequence of numbers. Choose rows and choose calls are really good too. Choose calls. So this is going to do is actually let you, choose a specific row, choose row or call based on index. So, anytime you're trying to build like dynamic reports where you want the user to be able to select a specific column, select a specific variable or observation, you can do all sorts of stuff like that. Group by and filter by are really good as well. Maybe you've seen those before. Those would actually let you build full pivot tables in Excel using formulas. Okay, so you're basically using pivot tables with formulas. And again, this is all powered by this idea of being able to refer to an array of values dynamically and then return an array of values dynamically. Super cool stuff. Lots you can do with it. I think we will close out for right now. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Let me just kind of do a couple bits of housekeeping here. First one, as always, if you like this, I've got plenty more coming up. Okay, so next week I'm talking about data visualization in Excel. We're going to talk about Power BI, Power Query. A lot of these are based on my book. Some of them are not. Getting into like AI, Python, and Excel. Okay, so these are all topics that will be coming around. I know some of them say like, May, June, July, but hey, they'll be here before you know it. So sign up now. Make sure you get it on your calendar, and I hope to see you there. That relates to my next topic, which is these are all 100% free, and you're getting like these are hours and hours of free content. I'm not charging for this at all. I don't know how much this would be if I charged for it. And I'm not asking you to buy anything at the end of these sessions other than maybe my book. Uh, I don't know if you've been to a lot of webinars before, but they sell the crap out of you. And I don't do that. Okay. This is just to kind of raise my awareness, get content out there, try out my material, make sure that people are resonating with my teaching style. Okay. So I really appreciate that you're here to do that for me. And if you could take that a little bit further, I would really appreciate it if you could fill out this event feedback form. So what this is going to do for me is know that my teaching style is working, the materials are working, you're understanding this is the right stuff that you need for your job. Okay, you can leave a testimonial as well that I can share for marketing purposes. And that's really all I ask for these sessions. So I will also put the future sessions in the chat as well. So you do have a few minutes right now. You are welcome to fill that thing out if you want before you leave. Uh, there's not really enough time to like get into new material, so I think we'll just end it right now. If there are any questions, you are more than welcome to let me know right now. Otherwise, we will end a little bit early. And again, I will send all this stuff out in an email. The recording, downloads, everything is there. So just check your email. Cool. All right, so if there are any final questions, please do let me know. Thank you, Jorge, for that. Thank you, Carlos. Appreciate everybody. I think I see one hand raised, so you're welcome to use the chat now if you wish. And then we will break for today. Let me stop recording. And then have a great week, everybody. Thanks again for tuning in. And see you next time.